Welcome back, guys. So today we're going to be addressing some concerns through research and through just kind of digging in the crates for myself. I'm titling this Q&A, the top 21 concerns that new cops have. And my lovely co-host here, my wife Darlene, is going to be assisting me with asking the questions. And I'm going to give my input to the best of my ability. Hopefully you get some value from this and it helps. All right, baby.
All right, first question. How can I ensure I go home safely at the end of my shift?
Going home safely at the end of your shift begins with the way that you leave for the day, right? So, the attitude should be that I'm going to go home in the same way that I left, okay? And that means that you're adopting a mindset that prioritizes officer safety. You have already done the work beforehand of physical fitness, combative skills, marksmanship skills, paying attention to your policies and procedures. So this way, when you're operating at work, you feel that you have been able to mitigate risks as best as you can.
Okay. What are the biggest threats to officer safety?
Biggest threats to officer safety are always the suspect's hands. A lot of times we get focused when we're on the scene and we're interacting with people with what their eyes are doing, their mouth is doing, their face is doing, right? People communicate typically with a lot of nonverbal behavior and mannerisms that may project a certain kind of state of mind, but ultimately it's the hands of a suspect that are not carefully watched that can pull a weapon out from where underneath its clothing and ultimately hurt you. So keeping an attitude of monitoring someone's hands is going to enhance that for you.
Awesome. How can I avoid becoming complacent on the job?
Well, really, the only two things that you can control in life. Well, I'll say it this way: the only two things you can control in life is your attitude and your activity. So if you have an attitude of a sheepdog, a warrior mindset, and that warrior mindset leads you to take certain actions that are congruent with that warrior mindset, then that means that you're going to be a person that trains regularly, that goes to the range, that prioritize physical fitness, prioritize good relationships so that you're not all stressed out and chaotic at home before you go to work.
How do I handle fear or stress in high-risk situations?
Well, when you're in the midst of a high-risk situation, there are a lot of different things that you can do. One of the things that you can do is what's called tactical breathing or box breathing, right? So what you do is you inhale through your nose, you hold it for a count of 3 to 4 seconds, you exhale, hold it for a count of 3 to 4 seconds, and you utilize that protocol over and over until you get your heart rate down. A lot of times when we are startled or we have a physiological response to a combative type situation, or even if we're just responding lights and sirens to a hot call, there's a tendency to overdrive, to drive a lot faster than you can actually process. The same thing happens when you're doing close quarters combat, room clearing. There's a tendency to move faster than you can accurately shoot. So slowing it down, breaking it down, creating a scene size up type of protocol for yourself where you take a couple breaths. When I was an FTO, I used to teach my recruits the WIN method. So going to a hot call, arriving on scene, before you get out of the cruiser, take a few seconds and ask yourself, what's important now, and act accordingly.
Okay. What's the best way to maintain situational awareness?
Well, the best way to maintain situational awareness is, first of all, to be switched on, right? Lee Morrison, the owner of Urban Combatives, talks a lot about being switched on. And I like that sort of mindset of being switched on, because it means that a person's in that yellow zone, right? They're not in a position where they're going to be oblivious, checked out, indifferent to what's going on, indifferent to what's being said. They're not having tunnel vision when they're having a conversation with someone in front of them and missing the other 2 or 3 people that might be coming around to ambush them. So having a detached kind of perspective. I like to teach to step back and step out, or step back and step up, to look down at the situation so you can see all the moving parts.
Okay. What's the safest way to respond to a domestic violence call?
Not by yourself. Number one, not by yourself. Number two, make sure that you're switched on and paying attention to what you're hearing when you arrive. When you arrive, tactically, you want to be parking a certain distance away. You want to have your vehicle blacked out, which means your lights are off. You want to make a tactical approach. You want to be looking down the street and glassing, right? You're looking to see, if you just pause and stop and look, what is moving in the shadows. That could be an indicator for you that might save your life if in fact that domestic violence call is an ambush ready to happen. Making sure that you wait for backup before you go hands-on. Control before cuffing. If you arrive on scene and readily discern that somebody needs to go to jail, then you need to make sure that you have established control and that you have numbers with you. You have a force multiplier with you before you go hands-on.
Awesome. How can I stay safe during a traffic stop?
Traffic stops. There's no such thing as a routine traffic stop, and it drives me crazy when I hear people calling out traffic stops, and when they call it out, you can sense that they are calling it out very quickly, but perhaps they haven't thought about the location being tactically advantageous. So what I'm saying, so if you're driving on US 19 and you observe a traffic infraction, there's nothing that says that you have to stop that vehicle right on US 19 where you have hundreds of other vehicles passing by, potentially slamming into your car. Time is on your side. You've observed the infraction, utilize that to your advantage, run the tag, make sure it's not a stolen car, make sure that the owner doesn't have a warrant, and plan accordingly. The thing about traffic stops is the minute you hit that switch and you activate your lights and you activate your siren, it's as if you're in a boxing match and someone hit the bell. Ding, 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 the fight's on. You've given up your surprise. You've given up your potential for having a tactical advantage because you don't know the person in there. You don't know if they're an ex-con. You don't know if they just got out of killing somebody and they're running from the police calmly. So you need to be very, very diligent to prioritize officer safety during traffic stops. Tactically, making an approach, if you can, approach from the passenger side. I've been known to do some things where if I do find myself by myself on a dark road or an alley with a vehicle that's occupied several times, I've been known to use a ruse, and that means a kind of like a trick where I'll tell the driver that I'm gonna have go back to my car, run his information, but in the meantime, my partner is going to stand by, and I'll reach over or I'll look over and talk. Hey, can you just watch them for a second? I'm going to run their information. Well, there's actually nobody there, but they don't know that. And so what happens is I have seen it happen many times where I'll walk back to my cruiser and the driver will start looking back and they'll start looking around because of the fact that I mentioned that somebody was there. So it's a little bit of a psychological warfare type tactic.
Okay. How do I recognize pre-assault indicators?
Pre-assault indicators: people shifting their weight, people staring at your eye blankly when you're talking to them, people balling up the fists, people blading their body to one side because that's the side that's going to give them the leverage to deliver a strike. In other words, you have to have situational awareness. You have to be paying attention to the person that you're talking to. And the way that you do that is by scanning their whole body with your eyes and not just getting locked into their face.
Okay. How do I approach a building during a call?
Approaching a building, I'm guessing that it has to do with building clearing or a building alarm. Similar to responding to a domestic. Anytime that you're going to be responding to a place that's unknown to you, in other words, the threat is unknown, the terrain is unknown, the actual structure is unknown, you're at a tactical disadvantage. So your job is to arrive on scene and do the best you can to start chunking away at terrain, chunking away at the location, reading the structure, beginning to form an idea in your mind as to what you're going to get into. Noise discipline is huge. Excuse me. Utilizing your flashlights tactically, making sure that you don't sound like a maintenance supervisor walking down a few flights of stairs in the Bronx with a bunch of keys dangling off you, giving away your position. That's a pet peeve of mine. And also radio discipline, right? So don't say more than what you need to, and take in the situation slowly and make sure that you're approaching tactically.
Okay. What should I do if I feel unsafe on a call?
So, kind of a loaded question. What should you do if you feel unsafe on a call? Depends on the type of call. If it's a routine call in the sense that you just got out with somebody or you got dispatched to a suspicious person, in the sense that all that you know is that there's one person potentially not being cooperative, or that a person needs to be trespassed from a location, or a person just got stopped for a minor, quote, minor retail theft. What you need to do is to, excuse me, this coffee is actually too good. And what you need to do is to slow it down, be situationally aware, and take it step by step. So, try to have an overall look as to what you're doing. Don't get too sucked into a course of action. Be flexible and pay attention to your surroundings so that you can make the best decision possible.
Okay. So these questions are more related to weapons and tools. This one goes, when should I draw my weapon?
Well, that's a personal decision as to when you should draw your firearm. If a person suddenly becomes aggressive or suddenly becomes in possession of a firearm or a weapon of choice, an impact weapon, a screwdriver, a knife, and becomes closer or gets closer to you, well, then you should draw your firearm and be prepared to defend yourself with deadly force.
Okay. How do I retain control of my firearm during a struggle?
Defensive tactics, combatives training, knowing that you have an algorithm, that you have a protocol of steps that you're going to do if you're in an up close FUT, right? Effed up tangle, having a pre-planned response, drilling your moves up close in that phone booth type of distance where you're up close and personal, knowing for yourself that if you are that close to somebody, that somebody reaches for your gun and takes your gun, what are you going to do? Are you going to execute an eye gouge? Are you going to do a headbutt? Are you going to use a palm heel to create some distance? Are you going to strike with your hands? Are you going to knee it in the groin? You need to have a plan ahead of time to make sure that not only you can secure your weapon, but that you are counter-offensive. It's not just about being defensive. It's about, okay, I realize now I'm under attack. Yes, I need to prevent this weapon from getting out, but I also need to psychologically and physically damage this assailant so that the threat can be neutralized.
How do I retain control of my firearm during a struggle?
So that was the last question that we just did, I think.
I think the first question was, when should I draw my weapon?
Yeah, I answered that one.
And then did I ask you? Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Number 13, let's go to this question.
Okay.
What's the safest way to use lethal tools?
Well, what's the safest way to use lethal tools? I would say that if you're going to use deadly force, but understand that unlike the movies, when you fire your weapon at a oncoming, aggressive, and committed subject, they're not going to go flying across the room. They're going to eat a lot of those rounds. In other words, they're going to take a lot of damage because of the adrenaline, because of the commitment, perhaps because of the mental crisis that they're going through. So make sure that you get off the X, that you move tactically away from where the potential aggressor or the potential threat is running, so that you afford yourself some tactical distance in order to adjust if needed, to make magazine changes, or to transition to a different tool if that one tool is not working.
Okay, so now these questions are related to backup and teamwork.
Okay.
When should I call for backup?
That's a personal decision. It's a good habit to call for backup anytime your spidey sense begins to start kicking off, where you begin to perceive signs, you begin to hear words that through trial and error, through experience, you have begun to relate them to suspicious activity or that criminal activity is afoot, right? So if you look at somebody, for example, and I use an example of a traffic stop, where you approach the driver's side door, you ask for the license, registration, proof of insurance, you're explaining the reason for the stop, and while you're doing so, you notice that they're looking at your eyes as your mouth is moving, and you're looking at your face, but their hands are beginning to move underneath their kneecaps, or they're shifting their body. You should stay attuned to that and be prepared to call for backup, because you know either they're sitting on a weapon or they're sitting on drugs. And more than likely, you're going to have to extract these people from the car And if you do, you need to do it tactically and with some backup on hand.
How do I communicate effectively with my partner?
I've seen a lot of different ways. The two things that come up are hand signals and code words. I think those are two pretty good tactical options to use that you can implement. You just basically have to get with your squad mates and, rehearse it. Make sure that everybody's on the same page. If you're going to use something like a code word, make sure that everybody knows. If you're going to use X, on your wrist to mean that you're about to go 10-15 or you're about to arrest, just make sure that everybody's on the same page.
What if my partner makes a mistake that compromises safety?
So in the heat of the moment, if that happens, the first priority is accomplishing the mission, right? So that is not the time to start yelling, to start getting sidetracked, to get OODA looped, but basically, and start losing focus of what the primary task is at the moment. In other words, referring back to that win method, what's important now? If it's something that's egregious, if it's something that is an officer safety risk, then perhaps yes, you do take a tactical pause from your forward movement and you restrain the person, or you check with them verbally, say, what did you just say? No, we're not doing that. We're not exposing ourselves. We're not risking a lot to gain a little. So it depends. It's kind of a contextual type situation, but I would say just use your best judgment, your best discernment. If the person needs a tune-up afterwards for not getting good control before cuffing, then that's something that you can hash out at the gas station when you're getting coffee after the scene.
Okay. Physical and mental preparation questions.
Mm.
How can I improve my physical fitness for officer safety?
So physical strength is an officer safety factor. When I was younger and coming up, I made a mental commitment to myself that the type of training that I was going to do was going to be less for bodybuilding and more for functional fitness. So I wanted to be combatively ready to engage in the fight. I wanted it to be combatively ready to drag a person that was needing to be rescued, or drag a partner that was suddenly injured and was down. So I began to basically compose programs for myself that were more towards tactical fitness and functional fitness. CrossFit's a good option too. So I would say if you're going to prioritize physical fitness, make sure that it's relevant to the key tasks that you are asked to do at your job.
How do I mentally prepare for dangerous situations?
Adopting the sheepdog mindset, being physically fit, knowing that your marksmanship skills are tuned up, knowing that you have the moral conviction to take a life, if that means that you preserve a life, maybe just your own life. These are the things that a officer needs to have settled beforehand.
How do I recover from a traumatic or a stressful incident?
Yes. Traumatic incidents are inherent to the job. No one escapes it. The challenge is that in law enforcement, sometimes there is a stigma with expressing that you're not handling a situation well, or that you're not coping well with what just happened. I think that the best thing you can do is to get with somebody that you trust. Maybe it's another brother officer or sister officer. It might be your mom, your dad. It might be just a best friend that's not in law enforcement. And let them know that you're not doing so well, right? Have the guts to tell somebody that you're not okay. Seek assistance and avail yourselves of all the different options that are out there. There's no lack of resources. And really, it's a shame if an officer has to deal with a critical incident and then becomes a victim themselves of the traumatic incident. So don't do it.
Okay, now these questions are about post-incident concerns.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do after using force in the line of duty?
Well, procedurally, what you should do is to make sure that you're off the X. In other words, you're out of the line of fire. First and foremost is your safety. First and foremost is securing the scene. So if you get to use force on somebody, well, now things are going to have to slow down significantly. You're going to have a lot of people coming to you, supervisors coming to you. Hold what you got. Make sure that you self-assess for any injuries that you may have, treat any injuries that you may have when you can do so tactically, while still covering down on the suspect that you just put down, and understand your policies and procedures, right? So if I'm a supervisor on the road now, so and I had this happen to me, where a deputy was involved in a shooting. So when we get to the scene, you're gonna have to debrief the deputy that was involved, check on them. You're gonna have to get a quick synopsis as to what happened. You're gonna have to lock down the scene. You're gonna have to get people interviewed. You're gonna have other supervisors coming to do a lot of legwork, because ultimately there's a big command level briefing that's gonna have to be done. So that's more for the supervisor, but for the officer involved, just make sure that your first things that you go through your mind are, okay, am I good? Are my buddies good? Are there any innocent persons that are down, that are injured? Once you get more backup on scene and you have the ability to transition to check on others, go ahead and do so, but don't get too far in the weeds yourself with investigative things, because you're going to be debriefed by a significant amount of people. So don't worry about that. Just make sure your personal safety is secure, innocent lives aren't wasted because of what just happened. Check on them, because that's your duty to check on them as well, and then move on from there.
What happens if I make a mistake?
You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. The idea, you see, most people in general, and cops especially, I like to say, we suffer from this perfectionist type attitude, or A-type of personality, which makes making mistakes feel like you are worthless, or that you are dumb, or that you are no good. And it's a self-sabotaging type of spiral that you can get into. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make officer safety mistakes. You're gonna make procedural mistakes. You're gonna make investigative mistakes. The key is to understand that mistakes are a part of the learning process. If I would rather have a person on my squad that makes a hustle mistake than a person that I need a kick in the ass just to go to be proactive. Because the person that you need a kick in the ass to be proactive, it's typically not that they're lazy, it's typically that they lack confidence, and they lack confidence because they don't have the competence, but they don't realize that the competence comes from trial and error, from learning from mistakes. So just embrace it, it's part of the process.
Okay, awesome. So that was our last question.
Great. So thank you, honey, for helping me with this.
You're
I hope
welcome.
that this is going to be beneficial to some of you new people that are coming into the field of law enforcement. It's a great field to be in. I'm very proud to have been in the field this long, and to have had the opportunity to serve the way I have across different disciplines, and meeting the different kind of people that I've met. But if there's any takeaway that I want you to get from this Q&A, is that you do a job that a lot of people don't want to do. I commend you for it. It takes moral courage, and that unfortunately isn't very commonplace right now. Being a police officer takes a special kind of person. So if you're doing the job, I commend you for it. It's an honorable job, but it is a job that, if you're not really sharp and you're not really committed to adopting physical fitness as a mainstay of your life, of training with your firearms, of training with your weapons, of adopting a sheepdog mindset, you're going to open yourself to vulnerabilities that didn't exist prior to you getting the uniform on, and it's just not necessary, and it's avoidable. So don't do that, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm here, is I'm more than willing to work with people who are willing to be coached. So I'm hoping that you get some value from this. Stay tuned for more content related to this. If you have any questions, go ahead and make some comments below, and I will answer the questions that I see in a follow-on video. Until then, stay safe, and ultimately we'll see you at the rings.